Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. My name is Victoria Dickerson, and I'm here with fellow Startup Junkies, Jeff Amerine and Grace Gill. How are you guys? Doing well. How
Great.
are you?
It's Friday.
It's Friday.
The world is in a good place.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're excited for today's episode. Today we're joined by Sean Fitzgibbon. He's the author and artist of a graphic nonfiction book called What Follows is True, The Crescent Hotel. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
This is great.
Yeah. Well, let's just get started talking about your origin story. Kind of how did you get into being an entrepreneur, writing a book, being also the artist for the book? Tell us about that process.
Okay. So I'm originally from Southwest Missouri, Webb City, Missouri, about 100 miles from here, north of here. And as a kid, my family, I'm kind of going into the Crescent, like the origin of that. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like as a kid, my parents would take my little sister and I, we'd go down to Eureka Springs, and I was just always sort of kind of mesmerized by this town because it's unlike any other town in anywhere really. I mean, it's like the only town in the U.S. that the entire downtown is on the historic registry. I don't know if you knew that. Like it's like none of the roads intersect in the town. Like it's odd. Yeah, there's all these weird little things about that. Like the Basin Park Hotel is 7 stories tall, but every floor is at ground level.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it's super hilly area.
Exactly.
Extremely
and
hilly.
So that's it, but there's all these little things like, that are on lists like Guinness Book of, and then like Ripley's Believe It or Not type stuff. And so I don't know, I was just always kind of fascinated by it. And we go to the Crescent, go on the ghost tours, and I'm a little kid, and this is back in like the 80s or something, and it's like they would, the ghost stories at that time were very kind of sensational because they didn't really know a whole lot about.
Sure.
There just wasn't all that much information out, or at least the people there at the time hadn't really done much research, and so. But I mean, my little 10-year-old mind, or however old I was like, whoa, I didn't know any different. I didn't know any better, And so it's like these crazy kind of stories about, when it was turned into this cancer clinic by this fraudulent medical practitioner in the late 1930s. And so I'm just, and the stories they were telling were like patients being, like you said, like strange, patients being like experimented on and just being, basically being taken advantage of by the charlatan. And so, and I'd heard things like, they found bodies in the walls and all this kind of stuff, which no, that wasn't accurate, but, or there would be stories that like, there was an exorbitant amount of calcium found in the floor in the basement. Like, they were burying, but no, I don't believe that really happened. But a lot of people died there, and so anyway, I was just always kind of fascinated by that, and it just kind of stuck with me over the years. And I just kind of was like, I wonder what really happened, And then as an adult, it's still just kind of rolling around in the back of my head. And so in 2003, I moved to Fayetteville for graduate school. That's right, and to pursue my master's in fine art. And during that time, I would like take little trips down to Eureka Springs, and my fiance at the time, my wife now, but we would go down there and check out the place. And she's actually a librarian at Fayetteville Public Library, and so it's good to have a librarian that is, because I decided, I'm like, what, because the stories were still very kind of sensational, and so I thought, I'm going to start kind of researching this a little bit. And next thing you know, we're like up in Muscatine, Iowa, and that's where Baker was from.
Okay.
And I'm like interviewing people, and I'm like, I'm kind of deep in this now. I'm doing like all this research and going through old like databases and cemeteries and just old, newspapers, articles and letters and all that kind of stuff. Lots and lots of oral history. And so that's kind of what a lot of this book is just sort of a stitch of like I'm stitching together all these oral histories and everything I've compiled and telling the story of what happened during those 2 years. It was only 2 years that it was this Baker Hospital from 1937 to 1939 up until Baker's arrest, and then it just sat empty throughout World War II. It just sat empty, and it was like this dormant, which was really this creepy time. It was like this, it's already kind of spooky when you go there, But imagine right after it was this hospital and there's wheelchairs everywhere. And it's like, I actually interviewed a guy, an older gentleman who, so after Baker was arrested and the place was empty, he was a little kid, and he and a friend of his snuck in there, and they went through this place, and that's in my book because he told me this whole story, and he goes down into where the morgue was, and he finds these jars, and so I don't know if y'all know, but like back in 2019, a few years ago, right? Did you know that they found these jars? Like
I heard about that.
Yes,
were they buried?
Right, they found these buried jars on the ground of the Crescent Hotel with human remains, like cancerous tissue inside. Yeah, I mean, I'm not kidding. It's the strangest thing, and I knew, like, so this garnished national attention. It was all over everywhere. And so these jars. It was a landscaper who was like worked for the Crescent. Was like they were going to put in like an archery thing or something, and they were breaking ground or whatever for that, and then all of a sudden these little jars came tumbling out, like the backhoe came down, and they're like, whoop, hold up, and then next thing you know, it's like they've got all these jars full of this unquestionably this weird substance, and it's roped off as like it's taken off to like state crime lab,
Wow.
And so they do analysis, and they determine that it's actually from the late 1930s, and so then it becomes the archaeological survey is there, it becomes more of an archaeological type thing.
Right.
And so in fact, I was here at the Pryor Center a few years ago. They were giving a talk about that when it was really. I'm wanting to do a thing with both. Like I'd love to pair up with them and do a little.
Sure.
I think that'd be because I think it really dovetailed nicely into that, like what they're discovering, in this book, But anyway, so it was just wild to hear all this on the news, and they weren't like when they first discovered that, they were like not really sure exactly what it was, and I was like, I knew exactly what it was because I had interviewed all, and so I'd done. So that was kind of weird to be kind of like in the know. And no one,
I can imagine.
And it was just, and it was. I was actually just finishing this book because I'd worked on this book for about well over a decade, like 15 years almost. Yeah,
wow.
And I mean, because like I said,
so it was kind of like a passion project.
It's been a passion project.
Yep.
And I was finishing it in 2019, and then. So that, and I mean, I've done a lot of like gallery shows, and I've done some narrative art, some like graphic novel type stuff in the past. And I've done, a lot of illustration jobs for clients, different concept art and production art with stuff. But this is like this big passion project because I've always loved telling stories, but I always have this, I also like history, and I like weird history, and I'm attracted to like when like my wife and I travel anywhere, I always want to go to the strange places that are off the beaten path. Like I'm a big Atlas Obscura fan. Like, have you ever been to Atlas Obscura, that website?
I haven't.
Check it out. It's great. It's like, it just is the weird places all around the world, and you can just find anywhere. You can look up Fayetteville. They tell you.
And so you've got the book, and it's this collection of actual stories. Talk about how the book is organized.
No, so the book is just about it's the Crescent Hotel,
right?
And it's really just kind of my research, and it's about the 2 years when it was the Baker Hospital.
Yep.
And and I mean, I go through that whole thing. I kind of go back. I go back and forth between like when I was. I'm doing the research in the book,
right?
Like, it's all drawn. It's like a graphic novel, but it's nonfiction.
Uh-huh.
And so, there's 3 different eras or 3 different timelines happening within the book. There's like the present, and then there's when Baker was at the when he was the proprietor in the late 30s, and then also kind of the early 1900s, Baker's early days, and then also when the hotel was first built, so which was 1886, and so yeah, you kind of have, and then I kind of color coded the book, like there's different color tones throughout, like there's 3 different colors, so you never lose track of where you're at in the book, like you always know like what timeline you're on. It's very, and it's
a mix of the narrative and illustrations and drawings and all that, right? I mean, that's all kind of integrated.
It's all integrated.
Yeah,
right.
Cool.
It's like a comic, but it's all but it's nonfiction, and it's really like I had done some like kind of pen and ink kind of graphic novel type stuff in the past, but and then going to grad school and going through art school and all that, I've done a lot of gallery stuff where it's more painterly and stuff like that. Sure. And I always wanted to sort of bring those 2 sensibilities together and create this sort of graphic novel type. But this isn't a graphic novel; it's a graphic nonfiction. Novels are inherently fiction. So, and it's just so anyway, it's one of these things that I finished that book around 2019, and then I'm like, so now what? It's like this guy that I went to, or I kind of know through social media, I guess. He actually went to an art school that I went to back east. I went to this art school in New Jersey for a while, and he had gone there and at a different time. But anyway, he knew of me, and he reached out to me, and he was doing he was operating as a literary agent, and because he does graphic novels as well, but he's wanting to represent graphic novelists, and so he was like, I want to take on this project and see if, because I think I can find a publisher for you, but he spent like a year trying to get it published. And the thing is, publishers were very receptive, but they didn't buy it. Like they were like, well, this looks really interesting, but I think the thing is, they looked at it as being like regional, or like they didn't think, because come on, if you're a publisher out in New York or Seattle or something,
most of them couldn't find Arkansas on the map.
Exactly.
Right?
They're doing like Eureka. What is this Crescent? What?
That's near New Mexico, right? It's like exactly. no, wrong A state.
Right. And so, and I think because I think they thought that it was like this sort of just a local sort of thing, but it's really not. It's about a charlatan. We've seen charlatans. It has a universal appeal because we see that today. We see the demagoguery and all that kind of thing on wide scale. And so, and when people read that, they're like, "Oh wow, I didn't realize." And so, so a year goes by and I'm no publisher, and so I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna do it myself. I got to figure something out. And so I end up thinking, okay, well, I'll crowdsource. I'll do like a,
Kickstarter campaign.
Well, I want to do a Kickstarter campaign, but what I was going to say before that is that I didn't even know at that time, like, well, I don't know. Do I do Indiegogo, Indiegogo, or do I do Patreon? I don't even know. I don't even know what. And then I started to do some research, and then I was like, because like Patreon, or am I saying that right?
Patreon?
Patreon is a, it's like that's more like if you're doing an ongoing thing, like a podcast or a webcomic or something like that. Whereas with Kickstarter, it's like there's a thing, there's a product,
right? Right. Tangible product.
Tangible product,
yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking, okay, and some of the others aren't as well vetted as Kickstarter, and so I like that fact that it's like, you not anybody can just say, oh, I'm going to kickstart whatever, and it's like, so there is that vetting that goes on, and I was happy about that, and so I thought, okay, well, I'll just kickstart this thing. So I studied up on how Kickstarter works for for quite a few months. I just
so what are your best tips for someone getting into Kickstarter that you learned?
You want me to tell this and then tell how the Kickstarter campaign went, or should I?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Keep going.
Should I tell about how it went and then go back to that?
Yeah, that's good.
Because so I do the Kickstarter and after studying up on, and also the thing is, I've worked on this for well over a decade, and so I've been telling people about this for years. Like, when's this book coming out? And it's finally coming out. So I do the Kickstarter launch, and it's best to only have like a month when you do a Kickstarter, because if you can go longer than that, but it gets stale, right? Yeah, that sense of urgency just fizzles out, and people are just like, I'll get to it, and they don't, you know, and that's it. So anyway, I do it, and I'm like, I had no idea how it's gonna do, and I think it was like around 11,000 for the initial print run. I was gonna get for 1,000 books. It's a really nice hardcover book, stitched. It's not like glued or anything. It's a really nice. It's good, really high quality paper and everything, and full color. And so I thought, okay, so so I needed that much for like about 11,000 for the initial print run, and because I found a printer out of Chicago called Print Ninja, and they were great, and they actually print them in China, and that actually cuts down the cost. I did a lot of research on the print, on all that with printers and all that. So anyway, so I had no idea how it was going to go. Day one, I launched I advertised for it, and then I launch it. And on the very first day, I hit $15,000. Like I made 15 grand on day one. I'm like, what? Amazing! It's like, and now I have it like the rest of the month, and it's like I've already done it. So because I thought I read where it's like that whole month you're just like, I don't know.
Are you gonna make it? Are you gonna make it? Yeah. Well, listen. What do you attribute that to? And then by the end of the month, 30 grand. Well, it was 20. It was almost 29,000. So gotcha. Wow. So you doubled your target.
Yeah, and I doubled it, and it was
amazing.
And so I've been selling. I've gone through 1,000 books, and now I'm on my next printing of 1,000. I've got my second 1,000 books, and so I've probably sold in the last 6 months, because I finally got the books last June, middle of June, and I've gone through probably 1,200 books.
That's awesome.
And
but Kickstarter is huge in that it covers all those costs, right? You're able to pre-sell essentially.
Yeah. And
so it's not like you're having to take money out of your pocket.
I took no money out of my pocket.
That's awesome.
Absolutely none. And so it's like, so your question is like, okay, so how did I do all this?
Right.
Okay, there's a lot of little tips and tricks that. First off, I read a couple books on just Kickstarter, like Kickstarter for Dummies kind of book, and it's like
that obviously worked, right?
Oh,
that was
that was good for sure, because I learned a lot of little tricks and a lot of little things about it that I would have never known, like one of the things is like I had no idea that so Kickstarter's like a club, and I hadn't really done much. I had supported a couple of things in the past, but I hadn't really, done a whole lot. And so I learned that if you're gonna do a Kickstarter campaign, you need to be like, go support other Kickstarters, because people will look and be like,
there's a network effect, right?
Yeah, right. Or is this just some interloper coming into our, because it's a community.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to just jump in there and being like, hey, I'm just getting, I want to Kickstart. And also, a lot of people think of Kickstarter as a shortcut, and it's not. It's a profit maximizer is what it is. But if you do it right, and that's why it's like, and it was also a lot of hustle. And so I was supporting a bunch of other, and I'm finding other projects similar to mine. I'm not just like going through willy-nilly, like just supporting anything. I'm actually trying to be thoughtful and like, and I was finding, and I still do now. I'm kind of part of that community. Like I'll find, stuff that I'm like, this is because they do vet.
Sure. So you're finding other stuff that maybe same genre or other books or art that's being pushed out.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that's like mine, but I found some. But I've been just other. Yeah, kind of in that genre. Mine's kind of spooky and and dark but and so there. Another thing was just the fact that there's like a million things I could say right now,
Absolutely.
But it's like the hustle. I just hustled it. Like it is so much. Like you really like. So I remember like so I was originally going to try to launch that thing like this would have been like April of 2019 or something like that, 2020, I can't, somewhere around there. And it was like, oh no, I can't do that. Or 2020, I don't remember, but probably not 2020, it was 2019. And so and I was like, no, it's too soon, because I still didn't feel like I was ready. And so I ended up doing like in October, plus that kind of fit better with my book,
sure.
And the Crescent and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, so I was doing like so much, like I was doing a lot of book talk, going to libraries and bookstores and all that kind of stuff, just selling. And so what I did is I made these little preview books. And there was another company in Chicago called Mixam. They also print like,
it's like a Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, it's like a little excerpts. It's like a little ash can comic is what it was like, but it was just this small.
It's a teaser, right?
Yeah, it's a teaser, and it was a 30-page full color, and it was a small version. It was and I made I printed up like 500 of these things, and I just send them out everywhere. I was like just going on. I was going on these just little tours and selling these things, doing talks, and getting the word out, and plus. Okay, a couple of things, because people are like, well, how did you do this? Because I didn't even know I didn't know it would be that successful,
sure.
But then later it's kind of, hit me. It was like, well, because I've been working on it for so long. Plus, you got to remember the Crescent Hotel is a legend throughout the Ozark region.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
And I don't think it's as well known as throughout when you leave kind of this region, like there are people that know about the Crescent, it has gotten some notoriety over the years. It really has. But I still think that it's not just, it's growing in notoriety,
Absolutely.
and things like this are just going to keep doing that, and that's another reason why publishers weren't picking it up, because publishers are so risk adverse.
Sure.
They are just so risk adverse, and that's why they're like,
it's a good example. If you have something that's kind of niche or kind of unique.
Yeah.
And it's not going to convince particularly a coastal publisher or someone in a big metro area.
Yeah.
The approach you took with Kickstarter and with kind of doing it yourself is the right way to go.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. It worked out,
Changing gears a little bit. Changing gears a little bit without giving away too much.
Yeah.
What's one of the cooler, spookier, freakier stories that you uncovered that somebody would hear about in the book? And I'm going to share my personal experience at the Crescent Hotel as well as part of this.
Honestly, I think I kind of told you already, like when I met the guy that was telling me about how he and his friend snuck through when they went through there. And some of their discoveries really are quite chilling, and I mean, I would, I'd have to kind of say that, because then how it ties into these jars that were uncovered, and it's like, I don't know, it's so strange.
Any thoughts about why those jars were buried? Did you ever do any research? What was the reason behind that?
It's strange. Okay, so that's another very weird thing, is those jars were actually, like Baker, he was such a conundrum. He was part of his whole spiel or his shtick or whatever was, he said no x-rays, no radium, no surgery, we don't cut into patients or anything like this, because he had this, like, they would inject him with his special serum, his special, his
sugar water BS that he had.
Right, yeah, basically, exactly. Glycerin, carbolic acid, and spring water, and crushed up watermelon seeds. And so it's like, which doesn't cure cancer, by the way.
Of course.
But what's weird is in his magazine, he was an entrepreneur. The guy, what's wild about it though, is the guy was brilliant. He really was. Yeah. And he was this entrepreneur. Like he had magazines that he had catalogs where he was selling like all kinds of stuff. It was like a Sears and Roebuck, with this in the 1920s and 30s. And so he had all this stuff going, like when he had his cancer hospital. That was like another one of his things. That was, had he not gone in that direction, he would probably be, pretty well respected this day, because he also, he invented what he called the calliophone, which was a calliope, but it was a calliope that ran on air instead of steam, like what you see at like baseball, one of those.
Yeah.
He invented one that ran on air instead of steam because his father was a machinist, and so an inventor, and Baker was also an inventor, and so that it's patented to him. I don't know. There's some question as to whether or not he actually took it from someone else, but he was very smart, But and if had he not gone into all the cancer stuff, he probably would have lived out his days as this prominent Muscatine, individual. And so it's really wild. But anyway, to get back to that, so in his catalog, one of the things was he would always promote stuff from his cancer, hospital. And so he's like, we keep samples from our patients, and he had the jars with these with all that stuff in it, and that's in his magazine. And it's, which makes no sense, because he said we don't cut into no X-rays, no surgery, no. And it's like, well, then why are you cutting into people and then having these? So anyway, after he was arrested and carted off, and then the jars were there, like and it was actually the next owner, the people that bought the place after World War II, and started it back up as the Crescent Hotel and Resort, and they were like, get rid of this, and so someone just buried it on the grounds.
That's interesting.
Like,
which is so weird.
Kind of a typical Arkansas story.
Right.
It's like, we can't take this to the dump.
Right.
Let's just dig a hole.
Right. That's it. Yeah. And they haven't even found all the jars. Like, there's so many jars.
Wow.
Like, there's this massive crater, and they actually built a little museum shed thing with plexi all around it, so you can look in and see the hole, and there's jars sticking out.
Oh my gosh!
So there's probably
it's some creepy stuff.
It is creepy, and there's a whole vein probably of jars, of jars full of this.
So here's a real life creepy story, and of course they build up the current owners, and we were there 15 years ago, something like that. Mm-hmm. But the current owners build up the whole most haunted hotel in America type of story. And so we were over there, we're like, whatever. That's all marketing hype. It can't be real. You go in and it has got a creepy feel as soon as you go in. And you take pictures and they say, well, people have seen orbs and whatnot. We're like, orbs? What are orbs? And sure enough, when you get your pictures developed, this is back long enough ago that they weren't all digital. Yeah. You do see the orbs everywhere in these pictures. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so, fine. So we're staying in an end of the Crescent Hotel that was near the morgue. Yeah. And it may have also been a place where at one time they had maybe mental patients as well. Because there's an element of that. Yeah, there is. And so we're like, it seems kind of creepy, whatever. And so after one of it was my wife and I and our two daughters that were with us. After one of them took a shower, there was this image that was a soap outline that was on the shower door. And we're like, holy smokes.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. I mean, it wasn't just, you're seeing stuff. It was like, no, that's a face that was on there. And so that's our story. And we actually took a picture of it at the time. So it's a really freaking creepy place. Whether you're a ghost believer or not, there's some bad karma in that place.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool that you went down that path to do a graphic novel, because it is one of those places that, regardless of whether there's actual ghosts there or it's just negative energy of what went on, man, it's real. Right. For sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I get into that in my book. So it really is a book that, like, whether, it's like whether you're coming at it from the ghost angle or the true crime angle or the historian.
So when's it going to be a Kickstarter? Have you sold it? Have you sold the rights yet?
I don't know how that works, honestly. I kind of do, like.
So you have to do a Kickstarter campaign to fund the movie.
Right, yeah. Well, it would be an amazing. I actually know how I would do that. Like if it was a, say like either a movie or a series, like on HBO or Netflix or something like that. Yeah, it'd be a great
Netflix series.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know exactly how you would do it, but the thing is, you have to know someone at Netflix. You can't just show up and do it. Right? You can't submit like just unsolicited material to them. They won't. Yeah. So it's like, you gotta know someone.
Maybe you do an indie film and push it out during Sundance or during the Bentonville Film Festival, right?
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. I've had like some like smaller sort of like production, film people calling me and contacting, about wanting to do something, and then you'll hear, and then you don't hear anything, and I don't know. It's kind of swirling around,
That's a cool idea.
But I've got the proof of concept right there. It's this book, and it's like.
Have you got an audiobook form as well?
Well, no, I mean, because it really works more as like. Because you kind of need the visuals.
You need the visuals as well. I gotcha.
Right, yeah.
I gotcha.
Which I think that's one of the things why it's also, it's been successful, like, going out and selling the book. It's like, it's so accessible to someone, because it's like, it's like watching a movie almost,
Well, maybe it needs to be animated like Sin City type of deal, one of those things that's kind of, it just seems like that would be the right flavor for this sort of thing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
And Mickey Rourke's still alive, right? So you probably get him to be the character, and he could play Baker.
Yeah, there you go.
This is a shout out to him. If he wants, we've got your contact info right here. So
that's right. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, Mickey Rourke playing Baker.
He could do it.
Yeah, he could do it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn it over. I'm gonna turn over to these two. I've been dominating too much of the time here.
So I guess as you were going through this research process, and you said you ended up in.
Muscatine?
Yes. Like, did you run into a lot of other people who were interested in the story, or did you kind of find you were the only one researching it? Like, do you think your book is kind of the best collection of information on this tale?
I think that it's, I think it's probably the most cohesive as far as being just about, comprehensive about that. Plus it's also, it's got the visual component. So you're actually seeing because that's part of it about like being a nonfiction book with actual locale, like places that you can go. Like you can read something. I love to read. I read books and novels all the time, but it's like, I also like, that's one reason I like this sort of nonfiction stuff, because after people read this, they can be like, oh, I want to go to this place. And they know exactly what something looks like, because I was very, very particular about making sure all the rooms and the geography of the Crescent Hotel was accurate, because I want it to feel like when you're reading it almost as if you're traversing the hallways of this spooky, of this spooky place. And not only that, you're traversing the hallways throughout different eras. You're walking through it when it was dilapidated, when it was a hospital, when it was a resort area, and then now it's back to being a resort. And so it's like, and you're seeing it throughout all these different times. And so it's like, I don't know, there's just something so fascinating. And not only that, it's like, an entirely new cast of characters, because it's another different generation.
You could see how. So it's kind of the way to think about this. Maybe an analogy is it's sort of like The Shining meets White Lotus, right? I don't know if you watched that. The White Lotus.
White Lotus.
That's out on. I think it's on Netflix now, but it's actually filmed at 4 seasons in Maui and 4 seasons in Sicily. But it's all these kind of interesting, dysfunctional characters, and it's sort of their story during their stay. But you could see, watch The White Lotus, and then think about, you already know, everybody's familiar with The Shining.
Oh, of course.
This is kind of that sort of flavor.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe you need to pitch the folks that did The White Lotus. Say, hey, think about Shining plus White Lotus. That's what we got.
Is White Lotus a series or a movie?
It is. It's a series. It's a 2-season series that I think's on Netflix that we just watched.
Oh, nice.
So,
are you off?
I've never seen it. I know what it is. I just never seen it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
it's pretty offensive. I'll tell you that right now. Fine. But but the thing is the genre is they start off with one of the characters, and not to give too much away, running across a dead body or something tragic happens, right? Yeah. And then they back it up a week and tell the rest of the story.
Okay.
And you get all the character development and all that.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah.
It might give you some inspiration for this movie that I know you're going to make.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, and of course The Shining, I mean, it's... And both the book and the film, but they're both, different. But I love them both, but it's like... with Kubrick's movie, it's like the camera's like he's using Steadicam and it's like gliding through the hallways, and it's like
super creepy.
It is super creepy, but once again, I'm very inspired by that sort of thing where it's like you get a sense of knowing, like feeling like this place, like I've actually been to the Stanley Hotel. Stanley Hotel out in Estes Park.
Estes Park, yeah.
I've been there. And a couple of times, my wife and I had a show, an exhibition. This is quite a few years ago, but it was in Boulder, Colorado, and so we just went over there, and we kind of went to the bar and just kind of hung out. And we weren't staying; it was staying there. We were in Estes Park, but we just checked it out. But it's funny how it's like I feel like I know the fictional Stanley Kubrick, the Shining location. Yeah. Much better, even though I've been to the, because of the way it's shot, and I grew up watching that,
right.
And it's not even real. Like it's a set in Pinewood Studios.
Yep.
And that was that was actually, I don't know if you knew, but like it was, as soon as that was over, like months, maybe a month after The Shining, Indiana Jones would be coming down into that snake pit on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, it was in the same studio.
It was that same studio where it was a snake pit in Raiders. It was so
you have to find a part for Jack Nicholson now.
and right.
He's just he always played. I mean, it's the most chilling character ever.
Oh yeah.
Here's Johnny. I love
it.
It's
great. And it's. Good. And it's a hotel. There's something about hotels too that always just there's an eeriness to it, and there's something about that just
particularly if they've been around for a while.
When they've been around, because like you said, there's this sort of this lingering energy of just of so many different people and personalities and dramas and things. I mean, the Crescent. Come on, like it was actually a fake hospital.
Right. Well, and you think about that sort of that constant battle between good and evil in the universe, and people come there, and this is in many instances might have been their last hope.
Absolutely.
And it's a false hope because someone's taking advantage of them.
Yep.
And you got to feel like there's something about that sort of negativity that lasts. Beyond the lives of the people that were there.
Oh my God, yeah. Definitely.
And I'm not superstitious or spooky, but I just feel like there's an energy that doesn't die with the people that were involved.
Yeah. And I think it permeates, like it just permeates throughout the entire the place. I don't know how that manifests, how that works, but it's like I love architecture, and you can see it in my work. It's like. And that's why I try so hard to really maintain the integrity of the actual location, and I'll go and do a lot of research, and I think it's palpable, that what you're saying.
Given that you're at this intersection of graphic art and the novel and all that, are you going to be selling it in Crystal Bridges? You going to have your book there?
Oh, at Crystal, I'm still trying to kind of get that going. I've done a lot with Crystal Bridge. I've taught a lot of classes there, and I've in fact, I actually this is related, but I recently wrapped a bus with my art working with Crystal Bridges and ORT, Ozark Regional Transit.
Nice.
If you've seen the bus with the butterflies wrapped around it?
I have.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's my art. Cool. Yeah, I did that. So that was In fact, I just did a big photo shoot with that for that, and then they're gonna have a thing at the Momentary, and I'm going to that. But it's funny because I'm still trying to figure out how to get my book in there. It's like I don't know how to, and I know a bunch of people there, but I don't know the
Maybe they'll listen to this podcast.
Yeah, well, that'll do it, right?
I know, because it's like, they're great. Everybody's great there. I just don't know what the channels are to get into that.
So what other locations can we find your book?
It's at Pearls.
Okay.
It's right over there.
You're selling it on Amazon?
I just actually just a week ago or so. I just put it up on Amazon.
Is there like a Kindle version of it as well, or
not yet? But you're gonna
head that way.
I'm gonna do that. Yeah, it's called like Amazon does a thing called Comixology where you can sort of. So they basically take and make it like a Kindle book, but they have. I guess it's like some program that'll take like if it's a really well scanned like. Once again, it has to be a certain resolution,
right?
And all these different specifications,
right?
And I think their whatever their program is will take all the panels, so you can like tap on a panel and it'll like pop. It'll get big and everything else will go away, and you can sort of. It makes it almost this little bit more of an interactive experience. I personally always like just books, but I've got plenty of books. My shelves are like sagging from all the weight of all the books, so I do have a lot on my.
Are you thinking, given it is visual and whatnot, and it's probably really cool digitally? Are you thinking about going the NFT route on some of this, the non-fungible token, the digital part of it, all the blockchain related stuff, or what do you think about that?
I need to research that more. Somebody else was just the other day emailed me.
And I've told you more than I know about that whole topic.
Okay, you wasn't you. I think it was through Artist. See, it was through Artist 360. Right? Actually, I got an Artist 360 grant for this as well as the Arkansas Arts Council. But it was Artist 360 because they were asking me about that, and I need to.
Well, you can imagine how you could take some of the images could become individual NFTs, and there's things that you could monetize digitally and. Anyway, that might be a topic for another. Yeah, absolutely. And I know very little about it, but I could connect you to the people
more than I do. Okay, all right. Well, yeah.
Well, as you think about this whole picture, given what you've done in art, now you're a writer as well. What's the next project? What are you thinking about next?
Well, okay. So my next project is I've got a couple things. One of them is I love this whole kind of places that I've been kind of inspired by since I was a kid, and it's like that it's interesting to find these places and then look at it through the lens of like being an adult, and just looking at and seeing it, and then reevaluating or exploring it again, as an adult. I think there's something kind of interesting about that, how our brain sort of, tries to make sense of whatever it is. And so like with Crescent Hotel, so there's some other places that I've always been kind of fascinated by, and I'm actually working with, I'm working with somebody on this next one to kind of speed things up, but I'm working on, it's three different locale, and and I'm actually going outside of this area, I'm actually going, I love travel, and so one of them's actually in Italy, in Venice.
Oh wow!
Nice.
Yeah, one's in Mexico, and the other's in California. So
very cool.
Yeah, so it's like it's.
Would it be the same sort of approach where it'll be a graphic novel that you?
Yes,
awesome.
And it's three different stories, and
nice.
And
will be three different books or three different stories.
Three
in the
different
same
stories
book?
in one book. It's going to be another big book, and it's going to and in fact I've already started on that, okay, so my book is What Follows is True in the Crescent Hotel. Right. What Follows is True is
that's going to be the tagline for everything.
That's
right?
the umbrella,
nice.
Right? So it's like that's the beginning of my.
That brand will follow you in what you do for this series.
What follows will follow. Well, it's going to keep on going.
Well, it sounds like a pretty horrible work trip to go to Venice to research. I'm sure that won't be any fun at all.
Right, I know it's rough.
Yeah,
I know. It's like. Okay.
Guess I got to go to Italy.
Yeah, I know.
Well, so how do you, one of the things is, a lot of time we've had conversations in the past about the intersection between art and entrepreneurship.
Uh-huh.
And you're there, right? Because you've got the art skills. You're a writer, but you're trying to figure out how to monetize that, and you're being entrepreneurial and using things like Kickstarter and all that.
Right. I
mean, what advice or would you give to others that are creatives, that they want to do something and they want to figure out how to make a living at doing it, this kind of stuff? What are a couple of bits of advice you'd give in that regard? I
would say it's going to sound so cliche. Like everything I say is going to sound so cliche because it's like I said, it's so much of it's a hustle, and also just network, meet people. And that's the thing when you put yourself out there, and because I also teach, I'm an adjunct instructor. I'm always telling my college students like what I'm doing because I'm like, hey, I want you to, when you guys, do your Kickstarter, I want to support that. I'm always trying to get them to do their thing, and I always tell them it's like, when you put yourself out there like that, the vast majority of people, they want to support you and they're great and they want to help, but you will. I found some that are the opposite, and I mean you're just going to run into everybody, and some people will try to take the wind out of your sails, and
there's plenty of people out there that have never accomplished anything, but they feel like they're world-class critics.
Oh, for sure.
And they're going to throw spears at you regardless because you're actually trying to do something.
Right. Yeah. And but you just have to keep doing it. And also another thing is you're playing a long game. This is not, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I know.
Well, you said you worked on this for more than 10 years, right?
And I mean, I know that sounds like, once again, I know that's a cliche. It's almost like a cliche to say it, but it's true. It's
overnight success only took 15 years, right?
Well, I mean, just learning how to draw.
Exactly.
Even that is a big, that
goes back to the whole 10,000 hour rule, right?
For
you
sure.
really have to have mastery over something.
Oh my God. Yeah, you do. And to where you can actually just communicate with the visuals like that, like being able to draw. It's like, and I'm telling my students that all the time, and so you have to become as facile with with your drawing instruments as like you are with a knife and fork, just perseverance and kindness is another thing. Sure. I always say, just be kind to people, and also, I mean, I think having a what's the word? Kind of maybe somewhat altruistic in your you want to do something for society. And I really do. I feel like I'm helping bridge this gap of history. It's like making history accessible.
Yeah.
And it's a gateway for literacy for children, for kids.
Absolutely.
It's more engaging, right? It's going to be more approachable, more engaging.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know. And I see so many middle schoolers, like I've given talks at middle schools and high schools. So and some, it's probably middle schools where they want to read the book, but I've had kids that are like, I never really used to read that much. Now I'm really wanting to just, read more and more, and it's because of this book. And I've also had some kids making their own, sending me their own graphic,
that's fun.
In fact, one girl, she was going to one of the Thaden School up in Bentonville. Their class that I talked to, the teacher had them do a podcast or a graphic novel based on some urban legend or legend throughout this area region. Yeah. And some of them were doing the Crescent Hotel. It was great to see that because they had their own take, and I'm like, oh wow, that's cool. I love that, because I mean, I'm telling the story, what I've collected, and it's like, I mean, someone could do that same story, and it's going to be a totally
different perspective.
Oh
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's vast, and so and that's another thing I always try to tell students or people in general is it's like, I mean, you're only in competition really with yourself because it's such a vast, the playing field is vast, and so it's like, do your thing and help support others, and And that goes a long way, It's like with the Kickstarter thing. I mean, I had to kind of read that, but it made more sense because, to help support other people. Like when I was doing the Kickstarter campaign, if it, like I was feeling like, oh, I don't know, maybe this just isn't, maybe that was it. I'm not going to, and I would just go support some other, I just go back some people. And then what do you know? All of a sudden I just get, it's just like that karma thing or something comes back around.
Yeah, pay it forward's a real thing.
It really
you
is.
support other people without any expectation of reciprocity, but it comes back.
It comes back. I mean, it's like, okay, so it's like a fist doesn't do anything, whereas an open hand gives and receives.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's the way I look at it. Like when I was doing my anything now. I mean, that's when I'm just doing anything, I look at it like that. I just do not ever want to have like a closed fist. Whether you're just going out to eat, tip, or what, just give,
Absolutely.
What goes around comes around.
Absolutely.
And so, kindness. Yeah.
You kind of answered what we typically use for our land the plane question.
Oh, okay.
But we'll ask it, and maybe it'll, you can put a finer point on some of this.
Yeah, so I'll try not to crash the plane.
No, it's one of the questions we always ask, and it's the kind of classic time machine question is,
okay,
if you could take all this collected wisdom that you have now and go back 15 or 20 years, and give your younger self a couple of pieces of advice, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh man, don't be so worried and worked up all the time, because I used to. I mean, I still do sometimes. I'm such a critic of myself. I'm constantly just like, those like monks that they like whip themselves. It's like
the Opus Dei thing,
Opus
right?
Dei, right?
Yeah,
I was thinking of the Da Vinci Code. What are those guys? Opus Dei, exactly. Yeah. I'm like one of those Opus Dei monks or whatever, like just doing that all day, and it's like, don't, because I've always been that way. It's like that's how I just always kind of push myself, it's like you're fine, just run the marathon. You don't need to beat yourself while you're doing it,
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's true. It's
Absolutely.
like
don't beat yourself up, but keep going, right?
Just keep going, and just enjoy the ride. I mean, really, it's like
enjoy the ride's an important part of it, and it's something that there's lots of different stories we can tell about that, but so many people that are goal driven, they're thinking, well, I'm going to be happy when I get there, and then they realize, right? There's no there. It's all about the journey, the process.
It's right now.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting here, like I met you 3, and this is great. I'm like 4, you 5. It's like, this is great. I'm loving it. I mean, I'm right here, right now, present in the moment, and that's it. That's all we have. That's it. And you're absolutely right. You just be in the moment and enjoy. And
Well, before we let you go, where can our audience find out more about the book, more about you? Give us the details.
Oh, yeah. Just go to seanfitzgibbon.com. That's my website. And I have a store. I don't know the exact. On my website, you can just click on store. And there's my book. And I also, you can click on, about, or you can click on there's the actual book itself. And it'll tell you all about the book. And you can see images from the book. And so, that's, and then of course all the, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff,
Great.
And,
well, when you get the next project done, will you come back on?
Absolutely. Yeah. This has been great.
All
I mean,
and we won't run out of bourbon, or scotch, or moonshine, or whiskey, or beer. It'll be here. That's part of it. That's the fuel that makes it work. Thanks so much for coming on. It was great.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Thanks for being here, Sean.
Appreciate it.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads.
If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.